Jordan Love has Matt LaFleur, who I've said is one of the best coaches in the NFL. So how does Love compare to some of the other quarterbacks who have the best offensive play callers and play designers in football?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Where does Jordan Love stand among his peers in a quarterback world where offensive coaches have never made it easier to play quarterback, where you have scheme merchants, let's call them, calling plays? Now, not every quarterback is going to fit every scheme, and so it still takes the right marriage of quarterback and coach to make this all work. So let's start from there. I don't think Jordan Love is a scheme merchant quarterback. I think there are some out there, and one of them is about to get paid in Miami a lot of money. But I wanted to look into it. I wanted to go in not with an open mind, because I have an open mind, but not a blank slate. I have a baseline expectation of what I think Jordan Love is based on his play, based on his development. But I wanted to see, where does he stand relative to his peers? Now, one of the big things that separates the haves from the have-nots, the quarterbacks who can drive the bus versus the quarterbacks who are just passengers on the scheme express, is their ability to handle pressure. This has been the knock on Jared Goff going back to his college career. This has been the knock on Tua Tagovailoa his whole career. You go back to some of the issues the Lions had in Detroit. It was a Matthew Stafford pressure issue. He would take some chances, not always as consistent as you want him to be. Now, also understand, this is not a stable metric. This is one of those that can fluctuate. You can be a really good quarterback and occasionally have these seasons where you just weren't very good under pressure, but when you were clean, you're just locked in. Aaron Rodgers, over the course of his career, it is fluctuated a little bit. And later in his career, 2020, 2021, even when he's winning MVPs, he was not, especially in 2021, great under pressure. And I don't mean that from a metaphoric kind of pressure standpoint, pressure of the moment. I'm talking about pressure. And we talked early in the offseason about one of the big things for Jordan Love is he's going to have to handle pressure well this season, both the metaphoric kind and the actual on-field teams coming after him kind. But last year, Jordan Love was 6th in Pro Football Focus grade under pressure, ahead of Brock Purdy, ahead of Matthew Stafford, ahead of Tua, and ahead of Jared Goff. Jared Goff, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the league when kept clean, was one of the worst among full-time starters under pressure. To me, that is the differentiator. Now, he's going to have to prove it. He's going to have to say, look, this is who I am on a regular basis. When Aaron Rodgers in his prime, you just didn't blitz him because he was going to cut you apart. Patrick Mahomes, when he had Tyreek Hill in his prime, you could not blitz them because he would eat you up, because usually when you blitz, you got to play some man coverage behind. And so if you don't get home, he's going to scramble. He's going to create some plays. It's the same thing with Josh Allen. You're going to send a smaller defender. You're going to send a DB. You're going to send a linebacker who in this modern NFL is undersized, and you're going to expect him to tackle 6'5", 240 of Josh Allen? Not something that teams are able to do that consistently. Jordan Love was 3rd in big time throw percentage under pressure. And I wouldn't have just looked at the second half. He was the best quarterback under pressure in the NFL, including playoffs. From week 10 on, including the playoffs, the highest graded quarterback under pressure, and had by far the most big time throws. Now, you might look at that if you're a cynic and say, well, if he regresses a little bit in a metric that is not sticky, then that's not great. Here's the thing. Last year, only Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Brock Purdy were better at avoiding turning pressures into sacks. This has been something that he has been good at going back to college. He does not, when pressure comes, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league already at not allowing those pressures to turn into sacks. But he's also not just throwing the ball up for grabs. He's not. He's had one of the best turnover-worthy play rates in the league from the clean pocket or under pressure. Now, the clean pocket stuff, that's where you'd want to see improvement, and that's where we saw improvement in the second half. He went from 13th out of 23 quarterbacks in Pro Football Focus grade from a clean pocket over the course of the season. In the second half, he was 5th. That's where you want to see the improvement, and that's where you hope that he's taking the next step, because the scheme is going to do a lot of the work from the clean pocket. Just let the play develop. But he's also pushing the ball down the field. Of the Shanahan-McVay group, he had the highest average intended air yards of anyone. Ahead of Purdy, ahead of Stafford. Even those, like Stafford is someone who wants to push the ball. Jordan Love had the highest intended air yards of any of those quarterbacks. And the last bit of this, just 46% of Love's dropbacks came when the ball was coming out in 2.5 seconds or less. To me, that is a telltale sign. Over 62% of Tua's dropbacks, or right around 62%, were 2.5 seconds or less. He's getting the ball out, bang, and let Jalen Waddle and and Tyreek go to work. Tua is the scheme merchant of scheme merchants. Like, Jordan Love is not even close to that class of, I'm letting the scheme do the thing. I'm letting my playmakers do the thing. It's not even close. And so from that standpoint, like, Tua, based on all the reporting, is going to get the big contract. Jordan Love is going to get the big contract. And we're going to talk about the big contract coming up in a second. But Brock Purdy is going to get the big contract. Just take those three guys. Of those three guys, who do you think is most likely to continue to produce when their big contract makes it harder to pay Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey? The Packers have some decisions to make, but this is why all offseason I've been talking about why I think it's great that the Packers don't have an alpha number one receiver to have to pay, because they got to pay Jordan Love. And Jordan Love is a floor raiser. He is more than just the sum of the scheme and his parts, because he can do things that some of these other quarterbacks in these schemes who run them effectively, and the Packers, remember, still 5th in EPA per play last year with all of the context you want to add. And all the context I insist on adding all the time because it's relevant here. They were a highly efficient offense with all the turnover, all of the young players, all of that, because Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. And Jordan Love is as big a part of that, if not more, than Matt LaFleur is. Because you can have all of the right plays dialed up, but you still got to go out and execute. And I'm excited to see what the next evolution of this offense looks like, to see where it can go from here, but it's going to cost. And the Packers have to figure that contract piece out. We're going to talk about where they stand and where they're going next. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more. You can bet on all of it at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit a home run. Brewers have no shortage of guys capable of doing that. At least one more day to bet on the NBA Finals. Tonight, that might all change. We'll see, but I don't know. Over the weekend, Dallas, they breathed a little life into this series. They've got a chance now. Jaylen Brown did not have a great game. I thought he was going to be Finals MVP. Could Tatum come back in and steal it? If you've got a lean, you can bet on it over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're going to talk about Jordan Love's contract situation here in a second. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN reporting that the Packers want to get a deal done. Brian Gutekunst has said by training camp. But the phrasing that Fowler has used is they want a cleaner situation than the one that they had with Aaron Rodgers. Well, that means not this big weight hanging over when you go, okay, you've got this bonus. It's going to create all this dead money. You have until August to make, like the Aaron Rodgers situation, comparing it to the Aaron Rodgers situation is a weird choice to me. Because if Jordan Love is the guy that you're giving all this money to, you don't really have to worry about that. The Aaron Rodgers contract was unique to that situation, unique to Aaron Rodgers himself. And that the way that they had to structure that to make the cap work and still make him the highest paid quarterback in the league. And then, of course, he gets mad at Diana Rossini for reporting numbers that end up being pretty close to right. I'm actually convinced that they went back and changed them after the fact just so the reporting could be wrong. That's my little conspiracy. Fittingly about that one, he still was the highest paid quarterback in the league when it was all said and done, which is what Diana reported. But the Packers, and I wrote about this last week for The Leap, they're going to have to change the way that they structure contracts. Just the way that this all works. They're going to have to change the way that they structure contracts. And then that makes it, even if you want a cleaner situation, that's going to make this a little bit more complicated. The Packers tend not to guarantee any money other than the money that is guaranteed at signing. The signing bonus. Well, that's not the way quarterback contracts work. When Trevor Lawrence got his money, he gets $255 million. More than half was fully guaranteed at signing. Now, he didn't get it all at signing. It's not all signing bonus. In fact, he got a modest signing bonus by that standard. But there is guaranteed money later in the year. You guarantee future years of the contract. Kirk Cousins got a fully guaranteed contract a couple years ago. Deshaun Watson got the fully guaranteed contract, which means this money is yours no matter what. Now, it's not all a signing bonus, which is money you get in your pocket right now. But you're going to get all the money. It goes into basically a trust to be doled out. That's part of the deal in the CBA. The Packers' middle ground here could be Dak Prescott set the record for signing bonus, $66 million. You could go to 70, you could go to 80. And you get to spread that money out. That's the beauty of these NFL contracts, is you get to spread that money out on the cap. And it allows you then to have some lower base salary numbers and some big base salary numbers at the end to fudge the total AAV. But I've been telling you guys since the beginning here, I think Jordan Love is going to get 57, 58 in annual value. It's not going to take much for that to be a cleaner situation than the one with Aaron Rodgers, because they're not going to be wondering every offseason, is Jordan Love going to want to retire, going to want to force a trade? And that's ultimately what we saw happen with Aaron Rodgers. If you're giving Jordan Love this money, it's because you believe he is the future of this franchise. And he's going to get, at the very least this year, when he's not probably going to be on an extension, he's probably going to be on the low money figure this year. And if you look at some of the other contracts, the Joe Burrow contract, the Jalen Hurts contract, you keep the first usually 2 years low. So this year, he'd be on a low money number. Next year, you keep the base salary really low, but did signing bonus. And then in that third year, that's when everything balloons. And all of a sudden, he's counting 48, 50, 55 on the cap, whatever it is. doing it a lot with signing bonus allows you to keep those numbers relatively low, but it means these big base salaries have to come up. Now, you could be saying, okay, it's going to be 50-50-50. But is that going to be enough for Jordan Love's team? Is it going to be enough when these other quarterbacks, if you're going to reset the quarterback market, can you do that? Like if I'm sitting at the negotiating table with Jordan Love and you're willing to go to that number, you're willing to go to 57 million annually to make me and my guy the highest paid in the league. If you're willing to do that, I'm going, well then why aren't you willing to guarantee this future salary? If you're willing to pay us more than anyone else in the league, if you think we are that good, then I want year 3 guaranteed. I want to make sure we're getting that money, because if it's just base salary, then the Packers could move on, dead cap hits, all that stuff. And if it's just the signing bonus that is the fully guaranteed part of this, then after 2 years, it could be the Daniel Jones, it could be the Russell Wilson, where you got to eat that future money, but it's doable because it's only that future salary or the signing bonus that's been spread out across the cap. There's not future guaranteed money, which I believe the Broncos had to eat when they moved on from Russell Wilson because they gave him a big deal with future guarantees in it. The Packers are not going to want to do that, and it's not a Jordan Love problem. But they did that with this last Aaron Rodgers poison pill contract, and they got what they got, and they ended up having to eat all of this money. Now, part of that is they had to move some money around, and that complicated things. But you just don't want to have to deal with that if you can avoid it. Now, if I'm the Packers, I have the flip side of this, and I can go, well, look, we're going to make you the highest paid quarterback in the league. We believe in you. We'll break the signing bonus record. Here's 70, 80 million due at signing. Here's all of it. Take it. We get to spread that across the life of a 4 or 5 year extension. And everyone gets to be happy. What are you worried about? We're going to give you all this money. This is us saying we believe in you. We don't want to have to eat this dead money. We've got a young team ready to compete for a Super Bowl. Don't have a catastrophic injury, and this is going to be just fine. And that's why there's an incentive for both of these teams to come together and say, look, in some ways, there is I like the phrase practical guarantees. That's not exact. That kind of means something different. But for all practical purposes, if you sign for 58 annually, and that's what the numbers in the deal say, it doesn't really matter if there's a fully guaranteed salary in year 2. He's going to play for that salary. Like, he's going to be the quarterback in year 2 of that deal, in year 3 of that deal. Now, the problem is, if you do the thing that these other big deals do, well, that year 2 salary is kind of low. So if you're fully guaranteeing that deal, you're not really doing that much. It's the year 3, year 4. That's when you want that. If you're the player, you want that money. The Packers are probably not going to want to do that, which is why I've been saying all along, if you want to trade less of the guarantees, it's got to be, from the Packers standpoint, more money. You have to be paying more annually to avoid the guarantees. And that's the smart move. And that's why that's exactly what the Packers are going to do. Speaking of a smart move, Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney are big name free agent signings, but they're more than that in this case. We'll talk about it to finish Locked On Packers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. When the Packers signed Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs, the top line benefit is you get good players. That's important. There is an underlying cultural benefit to signing players like this, and we saw it in 2019. In 2019, they bring in Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner. Young, hungry players. In the case of Adrian Amos, from an organization that rarely wins, he is hungry to be a part of a winning team and culture, to go chase a Super Bowl. Zadarius Smith comes from a winning team and a winning culture, but was a secondary player. He was a backup for most of his career there. Preston Smith came from an organization where he was one of the best players, but they could never win. Billy Turner was anxious to prove he could be a winning player, and he did it. All four of those, they turned out to be enormous. When you have not just a young team, but any team, it is vital. We talk about continuity all the time, but it is actually vital. And Bill Belichick has talked about this. It is important to turn over a certain portion of your roster to get new, hungry guys in every year, especially when you win a lot. Now, when you come up short, the way that the Packers had in the late 2020s, or early 2020s, excuse me, there's also that scar tissue. And yes, you're hungry every year, but then there becomes a little bit of complacency in the regular season because it's like, well, we're a veteran team now, been there, done that. If you're a young team, the worry is, well, they're going to feel themselves a little bit. They're going to come back and feel like, hey, we can be the best team in the league. They're not going to work hard potentially. This is just human nature stuff. So you bring in a Xavier McKinney, a young player from a team that has not won consistently since he's been there, had one good season since he was there. The Raiders, a perpetually flailing franchise. But Josh Jacobs, it was the culture in a lot of the ways that Aaron Jones was in Green Bay. And so you bring in these guys. You change the dynamic because now you've got these and the key here is it's not Zane Anderson, no shot at him. If you just let him play against Sean Clifford, he would look like a Pro Bowl player, but it needs to be your best players or some of your best players. You need to, when you bring in these good players, young players from outside the organization, they can inject life into your culture. New, young, hungry players. It's why this is the sweet spot and why Brian Gutekunst, when he can't bring those guys in, just doesn't. Like you have to find the perfect free agents and then you bring those guys in. And in this case, Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs, they were and are the perfect free agents. It's why they prioritize someone like Xavier McKinney, who had one great year, over someone like Justin Simmons, who's had multiple great seasons, but is on the wrong side of 30 and was probably going to have a similar price tag. He's still unsigned, by the way. It can't be overstated what kind of an impact Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith and Adrian Amos and Billy Turner had on the Packers' culture, the reset that they endeavored under Matt LaFleur culturally. To say, hey, this has been done a certain way for a long time. Now you have this new group of leaders. They come in. They want to make their mark. But they're also the best players. You're going to listen to them. When Josh Jacobs speaks, this offense is going to listen. He's one of the oldest players on this offense already. Xavier McKinney is not one of the oldest players on defense because they've still got Preston Smith. And Jair Alexander is somewhat similar in age. But he is someone who we know the quality of his play. And that engenders a certain amount of respect among your teammates. You want to bring in these guys who are hungry to win. Not just hungry to prove that the contract was worth it, not just hungry to get paid, not just hungry to get their stats. Hungry to win. And by those standards, Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney are starving. They are starving because they haven't won in the NFL at a high level. Both Alabama guys, I'm sure in the high school ranks, used to winning. And everyone wants to win. I think we overestimate sometimes how badly everyone wants to win. But when all you've known in your NFL career is mediocrity, and you come in and you have a chance to be a part of a team that can go compete for a Super Bowl, it changes your mindset. Or at least it ought to. And it can focus in guys who maybe weren't focused. I'm not accusing either of these players of that being the case. But it can have that sort of positive effect by proxy. Okay, we've been in this bad organization, this bad team, bad attitudes. Now you come into a team like Green Bay where the vibes are immaculate, and it's all of a sudden you're just like, wait, this is what this can be like? This is how this can work? And it can actually elevate the levels of play. And we saw that. Preston and Zadarius Smith had their best seasons of their careers in 2019. Adrian Amos had the best season. Billy Turner, the best season of his career to that point in 2019. I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to have the best season of his career, but last week I made the case that he's in the best position of his career to succeed, even if I don't think he's going to get, the 400 carries necessary to get to where, he would need to get to in order to match his most productive season when he led the NFL in rushing 2 seasons ago. I do think we can get the best version of Xavier McKinney this year, to see that. Not just because he's coming to Green Bay, but because he's coming to a defense that's going to rely on him to consistently be great. And a defensive coach who I have faith, at least for the moment, is going to use and deploy Xavier McKinney in interesting ways. That is not just going to be like, you're a half field or middle field safety, and that's all you're going to be, and just stand there and do the thing. You can't just do the thing standing there, of course, but you get the idea. You still have to have the coaches who are going to deploy these guys the right way. You still have to have the team around them. Yes, you go to a good situation. It's going to make everybody better. But it is not a coincidence to me that when you go back and you look, Brian Gutekunst, his approach to free agency has basically been the $5 DVD bin at Best Buy, or the 4K IMAX experience. That's what it is. It's either these perfect fit guys who fit needs, age, good price, even if you're having to pay a little bit more because of the age and all those things. That's the Preston Smiths, the Zadarius Smiths, the Xavier McKinneys, the Josh Jacobs, or it's you get Devondre Campbell in, the middle of the summer. You get Rasul Douglas off a practice squad. You pick off these guys where you think, oh, I can get a little bit of value here. Here's someone who's played some football. We're gonna grab this guy, who's a fringe roster guy who could be more for us. That's where he's lived. And I think that is, if it were me running a team, that is how I would run the team. So it's worked so far. I think it's going to work again this season. And I think he just happened to find 2 perfect guys. It's what makes it easier to say goodbye to Aaron Jones when the money's not right. For as hard as that was, I'm sure for everyone involved, when you get the opportunity to do what they did, the Packers have a plan. They have a model here. And you got to hope it works better this year than it did in 2019 and 2020 and the last time they've done it, because the Packers haven't won a Super Bowl since 2010. They're going to try and change that this year. All right, back with more tomorrow here on Locked On Packers. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And go follow us on all the social medias. Instagram, Locked On Packers. TikTok, Locked On Packers. Go subscribe on our YouTube page. All our episodes are there. Locked On Packers, so you can stay Locked On Packers.